Okay, thank you, Una, for that. Una, thank you so much for accommodating this fabulous event today. And it is an absolute pleasure for me to be here today to, I suppose, be right between two amazing powerhouses of humanity right here today. So to my left, or wherever way you're looking at this Zoom architecture, let me introduce you to Frida Kahlo of the Guerrilla Girls. The Guerrilla Girls is an anonymous group of feminist female artists devoted to fighting sexism and racism within the art world. The group formed in New York in 1985 with the mission of bringing gender and racial inequality into focus within the greater arts community. The group employs culture jamming in the form of posters, books, billboards, and public appearances to expose discrimination and corruption. They remain anonymous. Members don guerrilla masks and use pseudonyms to refer to deceased female artists. According to Guerrilla Girl 1, identities are concealed because issues matter more than individual identities. Mainly, we want to focus on being, to be on the issues, not on our personalities in our work, which is a quote from Frida Kahlo. And they also contain artists Kathy Kolowitz as a pseudonym of one of the other Guerrilla Girls. And to my right, let me introduce the wonderful Cailleacha, who the entire country knows at this point. They burst onto the scene with amazing moxie and gumption at the beginning of this summer with a show in South Tipperary Arts Centre. When the world was talking about locking away our senior citizens and cocooning them, these women had the gumption to set up an amazing political force and artists collective supporting the creation and production of art making, and taking inspiration from the likes of the Guerrilla Girls with their homage to the Guerrilla Girls in a poster work called The Advantages of Being a Cailleacha Artist. And I am delighted to chair this conversation between these two amazing collectives. Thank you, Frida, for joining us today. I know you are only in here representing one aspect of the collective. And gals, it is great to have you all here. And I'd like to begin this discussion by fielding a question to Cailleacha first about the word invisibility, and what does invisibility mean to you?
Okay, I'm holding the mic, but I think a good person to talk about that would be Patricia, because when the idea was mooted here to have this group, it began with Patricia and Terry and Helen talking about years of feeling invisible. So I think, Patricia, would you go for that?
Yeah.
Sorry, it's okay.
No problem.
Can you hear us? Yeah, she just turned it off.
You have a little bit of audio issues. I tell you what, while we're waiting maybe for the mic to, is it clipping in? Is it working?
Yeah.
Yeah? Go ahead, Patricia.
I was dreading being the first.
No bother to you. You're doing great. Go ahead there, Patricia. Great.
Yeah, it's, well, I don't know what the question was even. It was
Invisibility.
Visibility indeed. Yeah, invisibility indeed. Well, it was when we met. Sorry, I stopped again. When we met Helen, she'd just come home from Crete. And she rang me and she was telling me that she would love to come back to Crete and bring a few women friends with us. So Terry and I met with Helen and we sat around the table and we hatched a plot. And the plot got thicker and more women came on board, and we had no shortage of people. We decided to keep it over 70 originally because, well, just because, I suppose, we were all over 70. And we have one woman here of 84. And we do have a younger woman sitting right beside me, a child of 65, but she is our musician. And she plays the trombone, so you need to be a bit fitter. No, the saxophone, the saxophone. And we're having fun as well as doing art. We have a lot of fun, and we seem to see the black side as funny. Even we often talk about. People ask us where we're going, and we say, well, we're going one way, that's for sure. And nobody's too afraid of it. We often talk with the idea of dying and being a natural thing that it happens. And we feel very, very relieved that we're the age we are. And we feel so young when we're together. Is that right? Am I right?
Yes.
So is that
I'll pass it on.
is that an antithesis then to invisibility, this collectivity, how you have worked together
Totally.
as a collective? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. We sit around, and it was only last night I just said to Terry, I can't believe, imagine this didn't happen. Imagine this didn't happen. Where would I be now? I'd be at home in my kitchen. I'd be at home in my studio looking at the four walls. It's very energizing. We work together, we work collaboratively. And then we've a lot of your aims of the Guerrilla Girls, Frida, we wish to have anyway. We haven't got them around too long. We're only 10 months in when we formed, yeah. So we still want to do a lot of following in your footsteps. There's a lot of stuff to be done in Ireland, I can tell you, in the gallery system as well. So we've a long way to go.
Frida,
it seems to me that you're more evolved. We are kind of stuck with this anonymity, and it's interesting to think about anonymity versus invisibility. I mean, in my real life, I'm invisible, but in my professional life, I'm anonymous. And I have to say, I enjoy the space in there because I can decide which side of that, of that wall I can be on. But I think if all of you are concentrating on your personal work, that's great. And I know one of the questions you wanted to ask me was what happened to our personal practices. And the answer to that is that everyone has dealt with it in her own way or their own way. Some are more active than others, but I have to say, if your activism becomes super super effective, you may have to incorporate it into your own work. Right now, I'm having that dilemma myself because what I've been doing almost full time for 20 years is Guerrilla Girl work. I wouldn't give it up, but I also think that when you get older, you do start to regret things, and then you have to deal with the regrets and either put them to sleep or turn around and act on them. So I don't know, that it's interesting to think about invisibility, anonymity, and regret.
Yeah, I think that's actually a very interesting position. Catherine, do you wanted to say something there to that?
Yeah, I think there's two things about invisibility for women, for artists, and for older people. One is there's huge pressure on women to be visible and to be conscious of themselves and their bodies all through their lives and how they look to other people. So there's that side of visibility, which definitely bothers women when they get to about middle age, and seems to bother them more and more until suddenly they become so invisible that it is almost not a question. But it is a serious problem then for artists who are all about visibility. And so we're looking, and while we're determined to keep individual practices going, we are looking at collectivism and activism. And just one statistic, which is one of the statistics that we gathered for the Guerrilla Girls the last time that they were in Ireland, but it's got worse, not better, is the percentage of male versus female artists in the collection of the National Gallery of Ireland is now 99.7% male. So 0.3% of the collection of the National Gallery of Ireland identifies as female. The other 99.7 identifies as male. Now, there may be a few, variations in there, but they're not visible yet. So we are both thinking about ourselves and how we look. We're all in black. We've all got white hair, or almost. We're not shy of showing who we are or what we are, but we are also determined to make art about ourselves and about the world, and to comment on the things that bother us, and to say about all of that, we actually maybe are freer now to express ourselves at this age in our lives than we ever were before. And so when you say, Frida, that you have regrets, we can look at the regrets as well, and almost say, to hell with that. If we have time now, we'll deal with it. If we haven't, forget it, But maybe you'd say a bit more about that.
And is that a case that age is an advantage then, Catherine, in that regard, that, like regret, you just don't have time for it, do you see? Is that what you mean?
I think yes. But also I think, the older you get, with every decade, you get a little bit less concerned about how the rest of the world perceives you, till you come to the point where you say, I don't actually care how they perceive me anymore. Now I can just really go for what I believe in. And also, I think we all believe that we are doing something that is important as activists in the world by doing that, and maybe by saying it out loud and clear. Would that be fair, everybody?
Yes.
Frida, I cut across you there. My apologies. Go ahead. You were going to respond.
Well, I'm putting aside all the discussion about anonymity and invisibility to focus on that unbelievable statistic, Catherine. I mean, that in itself is a target for my thinking. It's unbelievable that this is a historic museum and a contemporary museum. It's just shocking that it got worse. And I would say, if you all need a target to go after, that's it. How can you embarrass the museum about that?
Try us. It's not a contemporary museum though, Frida. It is a historic museum. The difficulty is it's sort of lost its own sense of identity, and it is trying to be contemporary by buying and commissioning some contemporary work. And they are buying some women, but they have so much ground to make up that they would be better, in fact, I think, if they prioritize some of the really significant historic women that they have. Small number, but big figures. They have Lavinia Fontana, they have Rosalba Carriera, they have some of the great women from history. I don't think they even recognize how important they are. So, Rosalba Carriera almost invented the pastel portrait. But when they produce a document on pastel portraits, they produce one about a man and they include her as an also ran, That's the sort of thing. They just need a bit of cop on. And we're not going to make friends for ourselves by saying that, but sure, let's say it.
Unfortunately, they also have an awful reputation of paying female or not paying female artists as well. So let's shame them with this conversation. Let's truly shame them for what they are doing. So rightly so. Can I ask then about sustaining that, that momentum of collectivism in times of strife, and I was going to direct this question more to Frida, because the collective has been going for over 35 years, and also as an advisory thing to the Cailleacha. How do you sustain such a collective?
Well, the ironic thing is that when things got worse, we got more active. So bad news was kind of good news to us. And when we started, Ronald Reagan was president. So every president since then has created, unfortunately, his own atmosphere that then we've had to counteract. And of course, with Clinton, it was his predatory behavior. We're always sniffing around and looking at this situation and trying to figure out what part of it makes us angry. And we've certainly evolved, because when we first started, it was about female representation, and then diversity, and then museum corruption, and then now it's sexual violence and sexual abuse. Because if you start to look at even historic paintings, the women in the paintings are usually naked. They're either being eavesdropped upon, if they're not, if they're lying around reclining, or they're being acted upon, and acted upon in violent, predatory ways. And that's what our project right now at Art Night is about. It's called the male graze, not the male gaze, but the male graze. And I encourage you all to go take a look at it. We really feel that now has to be the focus when people go to museums, rather than seeing naked women as beautiful fleshy pieces of color and texture, that they need to investigate what's happening in the painting, and how does this come out of a culture that is obsessed with sexuality, with women's bodies, and then also a patriarchal society where there is just a lot of domination, exploitation, and abuse.
It's
So-
quite, yeah, it's quite interesting that you make those observations. In Ireland, we still have this Article 41.2.3, which states that a woman's place is in the home, where we should all be today, ladies, by the way. And it has an impact of things like our access to pension equality, etc., that you can see is reflected even in the advantages of being a Cailleacha artist homage that the collective has made. So that kind of socio-political environment creates the catalyst for organizations or collectives like, as you said, like the Guerrilla Girls, you're pushing against it, isn't it? Would you agree with that, Cailleacha?
I think we would. Who would like to? Helen, would you like to say something? Barbara?
No, yeah, it's fine. You answer.
Gerda, do you want to?
I don't know what to say actually. Oh yeah, sorry. Are we pushing against her? Oh, sorry. What was the question again? Sorry.
Are you kind of pushing against, the socio-political contemporary that, for example, I mentioned the Article 41.2.3 that's in our Irish Constitution that states a woman's place is in the home. Do you find those kind of constitutional or political kind of status quos affect the way that you are discussing the role of Cailleacha, for example?
It would. And I find it in itself shocking that this still is in the what's the grondwet? In the Constitution. When I came to Ireland, I knew it was there, coming from a quite different culture. And my husband and I talked about it and were so shocked. And he said he was very aware of his power he was given, and the power taken away from me. Mm-hmm. So I do think we work against that, and it's emotional, but it's also shocking how it perceives women, what women's place is in the home. And thus, even on the moment when people are separating or they are divorcing, it affects them in a way, So it affects male and female in a way. It gives an enormous restriction. And the culture itself, what brought that.
I think it was interesting, one of the points that you made in your homage was that, living on half pensions, and your generation of artists in particular were really maligned by not having access to full pensions because of this certain assignment or enshrining of the role of that gender in the home. So it's very interesting that kind of came up in your, I suppose, your manifesto. Yeah, in a way, as well as things like a nod to the creation of things like the Mothership Project, for example, which was a lovely thing to focus on, for example. But that is not always to say that na Cailleacha is also about being a socio-political or art activist collective. Like I really do note that you seem to be a very supportive collective and how you're supporting a multi disciplinary practice amongst yourselves. And maybe I would love to hear maybe a bit from Barbara about being part of a collective and how that shaped new departures in your practice, if you don't mind. And I know I'm jumping all over the place, so my apologies if I am, but I want to give everybody a chance to speak.
Have you asked me because I am the oldest?
Oh, well, actually, I didn't know that you were the oldest. But
What
I
was
guess
that question again?
I was asking you about, in particular, the advantages of being part of a collective like na Cailleacha and how that supported you to have new departures in your practice, especially, I think, in particular, your a voyage into lens-based media, for example.
Yes. Well, I had done made 2 or 3 videos before coming here, but there was something about working with other contemporary female artists that gave me a kind of freedom that I probably didn't have at first, a kind of creative freedom. And I thank you all for that.
And can you talk a little bit about the type of work that you've made? Because I'm kind of leading it a bit here, but I'm also want to draw the audience attention to a really wonderful film that Terry Rudden has made, which is a documentary of the collective, actually. And this is how I encountered your work, Barbara, was I was very taken by that very risky departure into experimental media.
Well, I took a single photograph against the black background of each artist, and then I recorded just a few very simple words, like Patricia's was, "You have to start all over again." Just very simple thoughts, and then with the image and the thoughts, I tried to create a kind of vignette of each artist, layering mostly the materials they used. I never wanted to use an image of their work, but I did use an image of the materials. So in a way, in Maria's, I used her the oak sticks that she paints with. And then I layered everything with just images that came to mind when I was thinking about each individual. And then
I think what's very interesting is the subject matter. These protagonists in your work are senior women, which you do not see in contemporary art practice. And even going back to Catherine's observations about the National Gallery, that representation of woman and body and sight is not visible. So it's quite interesting to see you
it was more kind of a metaphor. I was creating metaphors for their processes, their work processes, but not including their work, because that wasn't my work. And then, of course, there was a soundtrack from Carol's, both piano and saxophone. So I was creating a kind of tapestry of each person with many, many layers, always over and over again. So sometimes things just completely disappeared.
So could I ask then about being brave and being collectively brave and bravery, and how you negotiate that, or you start putting fear to one side when you work in a collective?
Yes.
And whether you put fear aside in, like you say, your practice as a practitioner or with the canvas, Can I ask maybe both Frida and also the Cailleacha to respond to that notion?
Well, Frida first.
So you'd like to know about courage. Well, I'm wearing a mask, so that can give you a whole lot of courage, I have to say. When we first started 35 years ago, what we did was could have been very detrimental to our individual careers, and we decided to be anonymous. And then someone wanted photographs of us, so then we had to come up with this mask, and we're kind of stuck with it. But I do have to say, having the mask and the other persona, I can be myself one day and Frida Kahlo the next, or I can be both personages in the same day. It is really liberating, and it does give you courage. I don't know how much you all know of the history of the American Revolution, but anonymity was a large part of it. You know, many of the revolutionaries adopted pseudonyms and did anonymous things. I mean, some of them were awful and racist, like the Boston Tea Party, where they dressed up as indigenous people and threw the tea, you know, the British tea out of the ship. But it did give us something that we could tap into, because, you know, women get criticized in ways that men don't. And some of the first criticism that came out was that we were cowards. You know, we wouldn't show our faces. And of course, we had this historic backdrop. We could say, but wait a minute, you know, Benjamin Franklin had a pseudonym, and Thomas Jefferson wrote the Federalist Papers under a pseudonym. And of course, there are masked avengers. What could be more American than that? So I think it would be much more difficult if I took this mask off. I think I would filter my thoughts and my words a little bit more. And sometimes I do make mistakes in my real life, and I say things that I should only say wearing a mask. And there are some repercussions, but hey, you know, that's just the way it goes. You have to speak truth to power, however you can do it.
Very interesting. Can I ask then that for some of the contributors from the Cailleacha, perhaps maybe even Carol or Gerda or Maria, maybe they'd like to speak a little bit about bravery and the not caring anymore what anybody thinks, or even a pushback against preconceptions of our senior citizens and what their roles in society should be, especially senior women.
Okay, Catherine passed the mic to me, courage. So I'm summoning my courage as I hold this object of reverence. And my mind immediately goes back to the 1970s and coming out as a lesbian then. So of course, was there ever a bigger challenge for me personally? And then the same thing had to happen again when I moved from London to Ireland, in a different way, in that there were very few of us in that time who were prepared to speak in the public arena, so, and be themselves. So my life has been a fucking template for visibility, you know, for the kind where you take the masks off, for your own good and for the public good. And yeah, for a long time, you know, there was just a handful of us, and like, come onto prime time or go on the Independent or do this interview or speak for the whole bloody population. And so that's not part of my, it's not part of my kind of, it's not at the front of my mind now, but I'm sure it's kind of fed into a like, well, you know, I just am who I am and I hold my ground. And then when I think about courage in terms of the collective, I think it's a very different kind of a courage. It's maybe more of a sort of a spiritual courage to let go of your individual ideas and know when to let go of them, and to trust that you'll have a happy landing somewhere else if you're just allowing work, excuse me, to develop in process with other people. I think it's a really beautiful thing, and it is a leap into the unknown. And I revel in it. I absolutely revel in it. So that's my spiel.
Lovely comment, Karen. Lovely comment.
Could I just say one thing in response to what Frida said about anonymity? I think we don't wear masks, and everybody knows, at least insofar as they know us at all, they know who we are. But I think age is a mask for us. That invisibility that we all felt was hitting us because we're older is also a kind of mask. We can do whatever we like now because nobody cares. And then suddenly, actually, they do care. And that's a very interesting bridge to cross. So I know individual people have made huge strides in their own practice just by coming here. So for instance, Carol was all music. Now she's our musician, and she, you know, her work is being used by all of us in different ways. I was terrified out of my brain with all of these makers, because I'm really not a maker, I'm a sort of a curator. But they expected me to make stuff, and they don't let me off the hook, you know. And Maria has been experimenting with new materials to make her landscapes that she's always specialized in into something radically different. And then Gerda got us all together just in the last few days to do something that made every one of us do something we hadn't done before, working on acetates so that all our work will hang one in front of the other and make an overall collective thing, which is all about us individually and differently and variously, but yet adding up to a collective whole. So, you know, I think we're all taking risks, I suppose.
Yeah, everybody's being brave. What I find actually quite extraordinary, and just to let you know, Frida, that these women have become superstars across popular culture in Ireland, because since they launched in for Bealtaine in the spring, actually beginning of the summer, they ended up on the main channel news. There was 3 national newspapers focused on them. They were on every single Twitter feed and Instagram. So they've become this amazing viral collective that is utterly inspiring, and it's kind of shifting the conversation in feminism around ageism, ableism, and quite, you know, inclusivity and invisibility. So it's quite exciting to see that, and it's shifting the conversation about where art and activism lie, actually. So it's quite amazing to see how bravery and collective bravery has pushed them into superstardom overnight.
That's wonderful. I'm so happy to hear that. And it's a power.
It
It's
is
a
power. Yeah.
And sometimes the press and social media can have so much more influence than what someone hangs inside a museum, what, you know, one curator or one rich collector. So congratulations, and run with it, run with it, run with it. Have you ever thought of yourselves as like a colony? I mean, I know that's a really bad word, but like an artist community? Would you ever want to live and work together?
I'm going to hand that one straight back to Patricia, because Patricia had this idea from the very outset that we should try to lobby for living environments for older artists, many of whom anyway live alone and have lost partners and so on, and are beginning to rethink their housing situations. But Patricia was very strong on the fact that we should be lobbying for collective housing that included studios, not retirement homes. Can I hand it back?
Thank you. I'm having this held for me, the poison chalice. What I was going to say is I had 2 sisters who died recently. I'm one of 5, and they're all gone except myself. So I'm very close to the process of dying and of the whole nature of it. And they had awful deaths, basically, in a hospital and in a nursing home, one with Alzheimer's. And I always had a fear of this. And before we formed, I had a fear of this. And if I forgot a name, I would immediately think, oh my God, I'm getting Alzheimer's. And since we joined up together, and I realized the solidarity that it comes from, just because you've forgotten a name doesn't mean anything anymore. Somebody's going to give you the name over there. And so we have this, our backs together. And this is the way I'd love us to process the next few years, and be with each other when we die, and know that how to do it proudly, how to do it with real courage fucking hell to do it with our fists raised. And
That's
Bowie
great.
did it. David Bowie put a sheet around his head. And I thought, God, that's so courageous. And he was right. He made a performance out of it. And that's the way to do it. We're all going to die, just some of us, and we are all going to die round about the same time. So I'm not saying you walk in front of a car. I'm talking about the natural span of life, that this we can do when we've got companions. And it makes so much difference. And thank you all. I'll do the same. Thank you. And thank you again. I'm going to say thank you as well to you, Barbara.
The other one. The other one.
Catherine. You know what I mean. You know what I mean. You've seen it in action. Catherine is really the mothership for us. She definitely is. And she's there taking the notes and reminding us what time to get together. And so the project we did with Guerrilla was just fabulous, to be part of a group art piece that's not precious. You know, nobody was there pushing to get to the front of it or be, you know, the best. It's very sharing. It's wonderful. And I'm in the art community since WAG, way back in the 80s, but I never saw such a form of solidarity here. And it's because we're old, because we don't care anymore, because we don't care what the critics say, because if the galleries don't take us in, we'll do our own show. If it has to be on the street, yeah, do a parade. We've lots of things to do, and lots of ideas are coming up amongst us.
Wonderful. Could I
I'm sorry, I was going to ask.
Go ahead, Frida. Go ahead. My apologies.
How close are you to being able to have a communal home or a communal residence?
Not near. We're only starting the journey towards it. We're going to start getting everybody we can behind our backs. People are interested in the idea, because of course, if we set this up, this could become universal, because it's the only way to go, really, looking at it rationally. Hospitals just are not the place to go to when you're old. And
I believe, there's some professor in St. James's is interested in ye as an organization and looking at this idea of like
right.
culture being
That's right.
at the age.
Yeah.
Correct in saying that.
Yeah, Catherine got in touch with her. We'll put you back to that answer. She's interested.
Actually, we know quite a few people in the medical world now are really interested in creativity as a tool to get you through the aging process right up to death. By the way, one of the things we're fairly keen on is we're not going to pass away. We're going to die when the time comes. And, you know, so we're going to live until then, though. That's the point. And so, yeah, we have been talking to Professor Roseanne Kenny in St. James's, who has been really, really supportive and helpful to us. But the whole gerontology unit, in fact, Patricia's son has also been enormously supportive, and he works in that field as well. The School of Geriatric Medicine in Trinity College is keeping in touch. So we're definitely going to be talking to all of them and to local authorities. And, you know, there's a wonderful project in County Kilkenny, in Cailleacha, where they've tried to build social housing around people in the community who live alone, along with mixed housing, people who can pay for it, people who need to be housed as a social project, and people who have disabilities and have special needs. And so they're trying to create some kind of social system where all of these people can be accommodated together, not isolated. We'll just try and stake out a claim in a similar context for artists to have some sort of a colony. Yeah, let's call it a colony. Colony doesn't mean imperialist colonial expansion anyway. What's wrong with if it were the right kind of
Like scrolls have a colony.
Yeah, exactly. We'll be a colony of crows, right?
Well, it's you know, what a great way to approach a different and a new phase in one's life. I mean, that seems to me to be idyllic, to say I'm going to go somewhere and make art for the rest of my life with a group of people. And what's interesting is I can't imagine 8 men being able to do that without coming to to a fist fight. So I think you all can set a great example that everyone could admire and emulate. I mean, it's the future. It's the future.
My only observation is that would this generation ever give us younger generation of feminists a break? Because he seemed to be doing everything. And you smacked everything.
We're paving the way, Aideen.
I see that, Helen. I see that. Like, could you just leave something for us to do? That would be great.
I was going to say that we had this conversation this morning of imagining, say, taking over an old mill and getting funding from various sources, and debated whether we would live there full time or not full time, and if it should be in Dublin in a sort of cultural place or should it be an idyllic rural place. And that, of course, we would all have studios and, you know, a beautiful gallery, and you can imagine it, utopia.
Amazing, amazing, absolutely gorgeous.
And opportunity for exchanges and other artists to come in, or, yeah, who knows, it could go anywhere.
I'm going to start opening the floor to questions shortly. So I'm asking everybody who's attending, and we've got a lovely audience. So please use the comments or maybe raise a hand to ask a question. Please feel free to do that. You're more than welcome. And I would also very much like to ask the Cailleacha and then Frida also, because it came up in a panel yesterday about like what would success look like, or what does success look like for the Guerrilla girls, and what does success look like for Cailleacha?
Frida, do you want to answer that first?
Well, you know, success for us, we've sort of built a different model for visual artists. You know, we're happy when our work is shown in dormitory rooms all over the United States, because you can buy our posters for $30, you know, rather than hanging over the couch of a super rich collector. So I think we've been more interested, our idea of success is having influence. And producing knowledge. I've come to the understanding that we don't produce precious things, we produce knowledge that then is messaged, you know, through reproducible, you know, objects that can be owned by anyone. You know, our portfolio now is in 50 museums all over the world, and not one of them has anything different than the other. It's just purchasing a body of knowledge, you know, that will sit there as an archive. So I think there are a lot of artists now who think that success is about being rich and, you know, and being famous and being a kind of celebrity and hanging out with other rich people. And that has never been very attractive to us. And I realize that that situation doesn't exist in every country, but unfortunately, that's what we're stuck with in the United States. You know, success is, you know, is conventional.
It's linked to that kind of capitalist construct. Of
Yes, yes, you brought up the C word, yeah.
Yeah, sorry with that. It's a bad
No,
one.
that's fine. That's absolutely fine. Yeah.
So Cailleacha, what does success mean to Cailleacha?
The C word is a big word for us too, because it's all about power. And while we're not looking for power in the conventional senses of the word, we would very much like to be able to make an argument and hope that it might be listened to. So that's what we're about. And we have all kinds of art projects in mind, either one or collectively or individually, that have that somewhere in the back of it all. We think that we have important things to say, and we have to find the way to say it. And some of us are maybe more overtly political about that than others of us. One of the great things about being together like this, though, is that the political ones among us, and I suppose I'm one of them, would have really learned how valuable the contribution that the less political ones make as well. So there's a great, I suppose we're talking collective here now rather than women or aging. The collective thing is just such a good microcosm for the bigger world outside. And if I suppose we're determined to stay together as a collective, that would be a measure of success.
Mm-hmm.
It would be because, and we targeted older age groups, is how we look after each other as we develop issues. You know, it might be deafness, it might be on my sight isn't great, might be somebody else's memory, it might be the old knees are beginning to give a bit or whatever it is. But actually, if we're any good at all, we should be able to cope with that for each other and make it work. Because the rest of society isn't going to make it work for us, that's for sure. So, you know, here we go. But I think Terry might have something to add to all of this. Terry, you're very political. And what do you think success is for us?
For me, I think because of the film, I felt it's a good way of staying visible, okay, and becoming back with the visibility. Obviously, the film hopefully will go further and further outside of Ireland, and I think that will show our collaboration in one way and shows how strong we are together. And that, I think, I also don't want to lose out of it. Every little process we have or every collaboration we have, I want to document. I don't want to forget about it. And I think with that, coming further on, when we have grown further, I would like to do another documentary to show the visibility, the strength of it, and how we have changed and where we have arrived. And that is my concern in terms of the group. And I hope we can sustain it and show within the documentary, further documentary, to go outside there and show people that we are actually, yes, we are a very strong group. We are a very strong collaborational group, and that is, for me, the most important element.
I have a question. Do you feel that your membership is now fixed, or would you consider being flexible? Have you thought about perhaps some of you wanting to leave or deciding to leave and incorporating new people into your organization or expanding? Because that's an important thing with collectives, that you're not a single body. You're 8 individual or 7 individual personalities.
Yes, we hit on the number 8, which of course the symbol for infinity and the female number, and I think we've decided to stay at 8. But if any of us is incapable of going on working or dies or whatever, then she would be replaced. We have considered associate membership, but it might be a pain in the ass. It might be far too much admin. We don't know. We're very young in this, and we're having a lot of discussion and as to how we would go. I think at the moment we're content to be 8.
Well, if I could give you some advice, don't have any rules.
Yes, hooray.
Remain loose, remain flexible, and realize that collective work can be messy.
Some great advice there. Messiness is definitely good. Definitely good. Can I open the floor up, because there's some absolutely fabulous comments and questions coming in. So I'm going to just scroll back here, and I hope I do this correctly. So there was a great question that came in from Esther Kiley, and a couple of people kind of touched on it a bit, but I would like to hear the panel speak to the notion of whether there is an expectation for women in society to be quiet, demure, unchallenging, enabling, supportive, and caring. To what extent do we still take a less dominant role in all aspects of life? And to what extent are you all artists finding your comfort zone as being troublesome activists? Okay, so who would like to take that one? So I don't think there's anybody here who's quiet and demurring or unchallenging anyway, that's for sure. I think you're all troublemakers from what I can see. The best possible way.
I'm going to take this one because as somebody who was in WAG and saw the same thing happen to WAG, and we never thought it would disappear. You know, we got great fame at the time and met you all, the Guerrilla girls, they came over to Ireland. And then suddenly it dissipated. And we really never had a chance to examine that and to see why did it happen. And that's why we're interested to ask you, Frida, I mean, rules, having no rules is probably one good thing, because we did have quite a number of rules in WAG. And I think some artists in WAG were more interested in doing their art than doing the politics of it. I don't know if you find that happened with the Guerrilla girls. And we talk about that because as we often say there's some are more politic than others in our own group, but we seem to be able to get around it because with only 8 people, we can sort out all the problems as they crop up. And I think once it got too big, it was harder to see the fallout. And this is what I think happened.
Well, you know, we've had over 35 years, 60 plus people come in and out. So you can imagine that 60 people times 35, you know, every possible thing that can happen in a relationship has happened to us. You know, some have left happy, some have left angry. You know, some former members have formed their own kind of sort of splinter groups, and all that is, you know, fine and organic. We had to accept it, and we've always refined what we're doing. And I have to say, it's become a lot of work now, a lot of work, because keeping it going has become a responsibility. So I envy you sitting there thinking about, you know, crazy collective projects to do while I have 1,000 emails to answer. But anyway, you know, we do make our choices, and I would say that you have to be tolerant of each other. You have to welcome people when you can and let them go. You know, when they want to, and that to have specific expectations of an individual in a collective without them feeling the responsibility is really difficult. And I think the fact that you're older and, you know, your lives are in some ways cooked or half cooked, then you know who you are and you know who you aren't. And there isn't so much of the pressure that you feel when you're younger as an artist to conform to whatever the system says is success. That's hard. And I was always annoyed with the word empowerment because it sounds like to empower yourself, there's a problem with you. And the problem is the system. The problem is the system. The system needs to change. So I think, you know, it's such a strange combination of criteria and decisions and also evolution that I don't even know that we would be a good example for you. I think you need to, you know, realize where you are, and you have, you know, just incredible resources among yourselves. And it just, I'm so excited. I want to come visit.
Could I just add?
Great.
Could I just say one thing?
Go ahead,
Sorry,
go ahead,
Aideen.
Catherine.
Could I just say
Go
one
ahead,
thing in relation to what Frida was saying there, and that is one of the things that we began off by talking. We had these group sessions in the evenings where we had set topics for conversation, where we worked our way through things that were issues for us. And one of them was about intimacy and relationships and friendships and overcoming isolation and so on. So I suppose we could do all of that because there are only 8 of us. Whereas if you're trying to handle a much bigger group of people, you just can't have that kind of intimacy. And so we're hoping that we're certainly not against having, we believe in what we're doing. We're very happy that other people should do the same thing. We would even be happy to help other people to learn from our mistakes and benefit from our whatever we've learned. But that doesn't mean that we are ready to expand our group of 8, because we don't think we could handle that and deal with the very things that Frida is talking about. You know, we're aware that disunity comes about and that there might be things that niggle one person in relation to somebody else in the group. And we're trying to deal with those as they come up rather than allow anything to spill over into resentment. And so far we've managed that, but it is work and we have to keep on doing it. We're very clear about that so far. And everything is so far. You live in the moment and do the best you can. But Carol wants to say something on this as well. So if it's okay, I'm going to hand back the mirror, Carol.
Hi. Yeah, it's just a very short thing, and it was just a coincidental thing. I was listening to a podcast, and it was an interview with Sarah Schulman, who had just written a book, and she, you may know, was, if not a founder member, a very early member of ACT UP in New York in the 80s during the AIDS crisis. Anyway, most of the interview was about that, but towards the end, she said, now I can't remember if it said the function or one of the things about a collective is to give space to each individual voice. And I thought, well, that's a grab. I'm taking that back to the collective. And I think the number of 8 allows us to do that. We have enough space for kindness and patience and a real love, I think, that's being generated. And yeah, that's what I have to say.
Well, you know, artists are educated to be uncompromising individualists. You know, it's a product of modernism, and it's a product of capitalism, and it's a product of patriarchy. And it's really hard to unlearn that. And it takes a lot to unlearn that. And I'm not sure that it's ever possible to completely unlearn that. But I think we have to keep that in mind, that oftentimes when conflicts come up, it's not personal. It's forces acting upon us, expecting us to be, you know, one thing or another. And I think that it's wonderful that you all are inventing something that doesn't exist yet, and that's super, super exciting. Really exciting. You're laughing.
It's actually true. Everything you said there, Frida, is absolutely spot on. I think ideas like this are contagious. And every time the Guerrilla Girls have come to Ireland, for example, they cause a kind of a seismic shift in the way things are changed. And it's been noted, even again, going back to like the Cailleacha's homage to it, that things have shifted. You know, we now have women in places of power, the director of the Irish Museum of Modern Art and Crawford Municipal Gallery and the Arts Council. Finally, things are starting to shift. Though, as Catherine pointed out, many things are changing, but are need to be changed rather. I think also that what Cailleacha have done here is been extremely generous, and that generosity is also contagious. And I think that's why they've captured the zeitgeist in Ireland in particular and popular culture, and that is their success at the moment. And hats off to them, because they're making us all think about our future and our future in this fabric that is our community of artists worldwide. So it's very exciting where you're all going and taking us with you. I see Katrina is here from Mayo Art Services, and Katrina, I may have overstepped the mark by reading out some of the questions, and were you
Not at all. No,
starting
no,
up
no,
those
no,
questions? My apologies.
no, not at
Do you
all,
want to
Aideen.
field one or two more questions, because there
Sure.
were some excellent questions came up through the chat box.
So from Lisa Fingleton, great to see you all and well done. What are your thoughts in relation to the artist's role and connection to climate change and biodiversity loss? Who would like to take that one?
We're happy to go with Frida first, if you like, Frida.
Well, it just so happens I've got something behind me here, which is our project way back in the 90s. It's called 10 Trashy Ideas About the Environment. And there are things like I like to use plastic, especially for making art about the environment. After all, art is eternal, and so is plastic. They were all sort of tongue-in-cheek comments about how people make excuses for not thinking about the environment. And we're actually doing something this next year for a project in Tasmania. And to be honest, you know, we've been more involved in the ecology of social spaces than the ecology of nature. It's not to say that that's not important, but I think it's all connected. And I think, you know, feminism and anti-racism and anti-colonialism, all of it together makes a net weaves a net, for ways to make the world a better place, not a worse place. So I feel like we're contributing to that.
Great.
Could I just say very quickly, 6 of us in this room are grandmothers. So we have a very committed reason to think and to worry about climate change on behalf of our grandchildren and their children. And so, Lisa, good to hear from you. Down in Kerry or wherever you are right now. A number of people in the group, like Maria, has been making her own oak gall inks and stuff just to, reproduce the landscape through the materials provided by the landscape. Herda is also really concerned and puts into practice all the time through her work, recycled materials and materials that are drawn from the earth and that won't damage the earth. And some of us are not pushed about adding objects to the world either that will clutter it up, or, we're really more interested in states of mind and well-being and empowerment for not just other women or older women, but for everybody. Actually, it won't hurt any of us, and that means having a world to live in. But Gerda, would you like to say a little bit more about that, Gerda or Maria? Thanks,
Maria, would you like to say something?
Yes, I've always been fortunate enough to live within the countryside and within nature. So it is extremely important to me. And even just driving across the country from where I live in the southeast in Wexford, driving along the roads, I'm seeing ash trees dying. And this is an epidemic across the country. We are losing the ash tree, which is such an Irish symbol for in hurling. The hurl are made from ash. And I see things changing in nature. Now, I always paint the landscape. And so it is extremely important to me. I go out into the landscape to paint it, well, to get the inspiration and the ideas. And I have 2 little grandsons, and I'm very concerned for them. We have been on a farm. We have completely changed our practice. From being having a dairy herd, we now have forestry instead. We have moved into continuous coverage forestry, and it's from the oak trees of these new forests that we've planted that I gathered the oak galls to make the ink. And I used twigs from the oak trees to draw with. And I picked up feathers on my walk and then my paintbrushes. And I've been working on recycled handmade paper. And this is a new challenge for me. And I think we must never be afraid to challenge ourselves, take up something new, don't sit back and get comfortable. And I think older you get, the bolder you should get, and push yourself into new ideas, new ways of thinking, and keep your mind open. There's so much out there we need to absorb. And I have no vision of being a little old lady crocheting in the corner. You know, being, would you have a cup of tea, dear? No, I'm out there and feeling I must reinvent myself at least once or twice a year. And working in a collective is a completely new thing for me. And it's a wonderful adventure. And because I'd worked in isolation, and this is so new, so refreshing. And I'm challenging new ideas the whole time, and it's great, and I'm loving it.
Wonderful, wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
Okay, so will we, how much time do we have? Will we take another question?
Of course.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Actually, this is a comment.
Will be easier.
This is a comment from Bernadette Kiley, which is really interesting. Just saying, wonderful ideas. Would love if old convents could be repurposed as art houses. Which
that would be such a lovely idea.
Wouldn't that be amazing? Yeah.
Such a lovely idea. There's, God knows, there's so many of them lying idle now around the place.
There's also Magdalene laundries.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. Yeah, they certainly need reinvention.
If I could go back just to the last question. I live in the centre of Belfast, in really what was once the most industrial city in the whole of Ireland. And so in a way, my thoughts and contacts with nature and the environment is purely within my work. And for the last film I made about the Cailleacha, what I was doing was trying to like merge human skin with the surface of the earth, and particularly the rock surfaces here in Mayo, as though they were one, and as though they interacted with one another. And I hope that, although it doesn't have any practical use, it helps to change people's consciousness of how close we are to nature.
Yes,
Well said,
very well observed. Excellent. I think that we will start to wrap things up. I would like to take this opportunity from the bottom of my heart to thank the fabulous gals of na Cailleacha for rocking my world, especially our country right now, and for being here today and giving such wonderful, wonderful contributions. And to Frida Kahlo of the Guerrilla Girls, thank you ever so much. I'd like to note that the Guerrilla Girls currently have this fabulous project in the UK that was launched on the 18th of June called Art Night UK. So there are 11 cities involved with 11 billboards asking for contributions for people to look out for nudes in museums. Am I correct in saying this, Frida? And to contribute to the male greys. Am I correct in giving that?
Well, to go to museums, the question is, are there more naked women than women artists in British museums? And asking people to go to their favorite museum and do a count and send us the information. And then we have a website about bad male behavior in the history of art, and it's called themalegrays.com. So have some fun and get angry.
That's fantastic. And that's exactly what we need to do. And we absolutely need to deconstruct our National Gallery. Thank you very much for pointing that out, na Cailleacha. Thank you so much. It was wonderful. I also would very much like to thank Mayo County Council, who are an amazing support to the othered voice right across the west of Ireland with their services and their programming. This is a great example of what they do. So thank you very much to Katrina, and especially to Ballinglen as well for hosting na Cailleacha and this great In Conversation. They were there from the start when they first met in September, and it has been an absolute joy to see them back again and hopefully enjoying themselves up in the far west of the country. Thank you, the audience, for being here and your absolutely wonderful contributions. I'm sorry we didn't get through all of those questions, so my apologies for that. But this is not the end, and you will be seeing these wonderful women breaking through many more glass ceilings, I can tell you that. So thank you all very much for today. It was great crack. Thanks.
Thanks, Aideen.
Thank you. And just before we go as well, I just want to say that we spoke very briefly, we touched on the subject of the homage to Guerrilla Girls, to the collective Cailleacha have made a poster available. So that's it, yeah. So there is an exhibition taking place, The Age of Reason and Unreason, by the Cailleacha in Ballinglen. And as part of that exhibition, there's a number of things happening, but that poster, the advantage of being a Cailleacha artist, will be available there over the course of the exhibition. And then if anybody happens to be in the area, you know, as you do, next Monday, 28th, 3 p.m, the group will be doing doll making demonstrations. So they'll be situated in different locations throughout Ballinglen Arts Foundation. And they'll present demonstrations and discussions about making dolls, and the dolls being about identity and their alter ego. So it's pretty interesting. So if anybody is in the area and would like to go and see that, you can drop me an email on mayoarts@mayococo.ie. And I think that's everything. That's kind of a quick summary of the remaining events for the next couple of weeks.
Can we say thank you from the Cailleacha as well to everybody, to Frida for coming on board immediately that you were asked. Thank you, Frida. To Aideen and Katrina, obviously, to yourself and Aoife, and to the wonderful Una. We'd be lost without Una. She's just amazing. She just welcomed us here as if she would bring us into her own home. So thank you, all of you.
And thank you for giving me so many new things to think about.
Wonderful.
Pleasure.
Wonderful. Okay.
Thanks
all.
everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.